Hi, my name is Blair. I'm in Zone 8B, Central Texas, Austin urban area. I have a fairly decently sized garden. It's been built up over 6 years. And today I really wanted to talk about, sorry, the sun's a bit in my eyes. I really wanted to talk about the different kind of garden beds we've built over the years. We've tried different ones. For a while there was one a year, and then I've added more and more. I've tried some things and undone them because they were terrible. And I could talk a little bit about that as well. But the different types of garden beds that I've had are, we started out with a concrete one. I'll show you that. Then I tried kind of a well, I tried one that was like wood and metal. I'll tell you the pros and cons of that, show you some issues with it. And then I tried one that was kind of a sort of pre-made from the store, and I'll tell you some issues I had with that one. And then I started buying kind of, I did an animal trough. I've got all kinds of different things and different thoughts on each one. So we're going to start first with the concrete one, which was my very first bed. And it's still in really good condition. But there are some pros and cons to this particular bed style. So we're going to start with that, and then we'll move on. And I'm going to try to do them in chronological order, but I may also do them with what's nearest and nearby and kind of talk about when and why we decided to implement that particular bed. I don't think there's anything right or wrong about one type of bed or another. I think there's just pros and cons, and that's what we're going to go over. I'll turn you around here. I'm going to head over to my first bed. I've talked about this one a little bit before, but this is a concrete bed. So it is concrete cinder blocks, and you can just see it right here. It's 3 concrete cinder blocks tall, and we have oriented the concrete cinder blocks so that we could use the pockets. Also, if you put them on their side, all the dirt would just leak out. So, but we've gotten the ones with pockets. One, they're lighter weight, and two, I can use the pockets to plant herbs in. That is a completely out of control parsley plant, but I'm letting it get out of control for pollinators, and I don't really have anything else to put there right now. I've got herbs all the way around the outside edge. It sort of is containing this mint, though the mint is out of control as mint does. And we'll just kind of, let me see if I can zoom out a little. There we go. So this is the whole bed, and pros and cons. Pockets around the outside edge are great. The problem is then you end up with a lot of crowding. So I've got these annual or perennial herbs, and I really love that. I think it's a great way to grow perennial herbs. They're kind of planted to this side of the garden. South is behind me, and so they're kind of protected by the bigger plants that grow in the center in the hot summer months, and so the herbs are able to survive Texas's hot summers. I would say it retains water or moisture pretty well. I haven't had too many issues with that. I don't think I've noticed this bed being any drier than my other beds, or wetter for that matter. I will say that the soil and such leaks out the sides a little bit. You'll notice cracks in the sides that aren't a major problem, but I have noticed that this one in particular, the soil doesn't just seem to settle, it seems to actually leak out a little bit. So I'm usually adding an inch or two of soil each year. It's we put rebar in a few places. These are just rebar poles, and they're hammered all the way through into the ground, and that keeps it fairly stable. You'll notice like the one that it's hammered into is stable, and it's kind of keeping the whole wall up. But like over here, we didn't put rebar at this end of the bed, and it is starting to kind of fall apart. And once it's falling apart like that, in order to rebuild, I mean, we'd have to take the entire thing apart to rebuild it. Some other time I'll talk about my hose system for water, but I do recommend a watering system in general, and specifically these kind of, I think they're 1 inch or half inch pipes rather than the thin ones. We started out with the thin ones and replaced later. But anyway, that's our first bed. I think it's great. It has its purposes. I wouldn't do all this kind of bed just because I find that the cinder blocks, you end up taking up a lot of space, and the inside, even though this is a 4-foot by 8-foot bed, realistically, I can't plant like 2 rows of crops on the inside because it's really just not wide enough on the inside with the plants on the outside as well. And the dirt space isn't big enough. All right, so the second bed we built, my husband built this one. This was it's just a wood frame with metal siding. We thought it would look nice, and it does. It's probably the most worn out of the beds that we have built. But since it was wood, we were able to drill into the side to, put in a watering system. I think that worked pretty well. And but it's got some issues. The main one being it's basically just kind of rotting and falling apart. We put some bracing boards in the center here. Not how well you can see that. Sure, how well you can see that on camera, but they've completely rotted out. I mean, this board is completely shot. And I do like the size of this bed, though. I think it's like 18 inches by 10 feet long, and it's great for against a south-facing wall. My plants that have been here during big freezes over the winter have done great, but check this out. I mean, there's really no way to replace it. We've tried adding extra screws to pull it back together, but like this wood is just kind of beat up. The dirt's pushed all the way out here, and again, we'd have to completely pull out all the dirt and start over and rebuild it, and that's just not happening. I will say the way that I filled this bed was different. The first bed, that concrete one over there, I filled just straight up with soil. I think maybe I put some topsoil from my yard and clay and stuff in the bottom, and I even think I put weed blocker. I would say if your bed's over 2 feet tall, probably 2.5 feet tall, you don't need to put weed blocker at the bottom. It's not going to be an issue. But this one, I did something called hugelkultur. I took logs from a pecan tree that drops limbs in our yard, chopped them up, and filled about the bottom third of this with, the bigger the chunks, the better. We didn't have huge chunks, but then put in sticks and then leaves for about the first half of it, and then the rest was soil. That did mean it settled quite a bit over the years, so I've had to add soil every year, but I want to say I think it's one of my best beds as far as soil health. It just really seems to have the most depth of things don't dry out too much. I just always get good crops out of it. I mean, these green beans this year are a testament to, or the green snap peas this year are a testament to that. All right, I think chronologically, this was my next bed. This was a trough. We had to have a friend with a pickup truck, or a relative with a pickup truck, bring this one in. I ordered it online, and the next time they came to visit, they stopped in and picked it up for me because it would not fit in our vehicle. But this is, I want to say it's like 2 feet by, let's see if it says on the side, 2 feet by 6 feet or 5 feet, maybe 5 feet. This is a great bed. What we did is I can't even remember if we put cinder blocks or rocks underneath it, but we tried to level the ground as much as possible. I don't think we did as good of a job leveling as we could have. I think it's tilting a little bit forward. So if I did it again, I would level it out. But again, once you have these things installed, they're really hard to undo. Just the idea of digging all the dirt out of this is it's not going to happen. So basically, this bed is really in a great location because it gets shade in the heat of summer. And so I've planted my peppers here in the past. I'm finally rotating them, which you should do. But lettuce kind of lasts a little bit longer here. It's good for herbs and things like that. And I did a little bit of hugelkultur in this as well. Now, it is a solid bottom trough. I think that makes it, especially for its height, more structurally sound. But we drilled a ton of large, I want to say 1/2 to 1 inch holes just with a metal bit on a drill on the bottom of this. That's actually really easy to do. Just go to the hardware store, get a metal bit, and install that. I have just put in new mulch, which I think is really helpful around the outside edge because walking around it, and you can see like the ground on the back is a little bit higher up than the ground on the front. And then obviously we installed a watering system. I think this one is good. It's solid. It's not as big, but it is in a unique location. I think it looks really pretty. I could probably take that sticker off the front of it. I think it's a nice looking one, especially if you've got a very visible space in your yard. This is a very visible space in our yard. I think it's a really good one for that. These I actually found off the side of the street. It looks like they're probably a 2x12 construction on the outside, and then they've got kind of this wood piece on the top. Somebody had thrown them in like a dumpster bag on our street, and I just got my car, came back, and there was this and one other one, and I brought them home, and my husband just rolled his eyes because it was another garden bed, and I'd already made one that year. So it was a funny thing. But this one, I don't love the location of it. It's not as sunny, and so it only gets sun in the peak of summer. It's also a very visible location, so I really just put flowers in it. These screws here are actually superfluous. They aren't really needed. We tried to put a netting over it to protect from squirrels, and the squirrels ignored us. We'll put it that way. But I think it's a good bed. It's a really good starter bed. I think it'd be fairly easy to construct. You just cut the pieces of wood, screw it together. It's about 12. I assume that's 12-inch board, so it's at least a foot deep, which is nice. I'm not sure I would add these top pieces to it though, because I don't think they add anything, though they might add structurally, and they just seem to be in the way to me. Like they're maybe shading some plants in the winter that otherwise don't need to be shaded. But it's an okay bed construction. I think it'll work. It'll probably wear out. I mean, you can see there's already some wear and tear on it. I have no idea how old it was when I got it, probably a year or two, but you know, the baseboards are coming apart in the back and things like that. And just eventually over time, no matter how many screws you drill in it, dirt has a lot of pressure and it's going to push out on the outside edge. So it's a great starter thing. I'm not sure I would build all of my beds out of that kind of construction. All right, this is another unique kind of bed. This one, I was just walking through Lowe's. My husband was like, he was too busy at work to be able to build me another bed, and I wanted another bed, and I wanted it right then and there. So I saw these concrete blocks at Lowe's. I think it was Lowe's or Home Depot. I think it was Lowe's. And then you would get a probably 2x6s to insert into these gaps right here. And then, and that's just all it is all the way around is that's just those 2x6s. I think it's a great starter bed. It was so easy. You didn't need any tools. You could probably get all of those 2x6s cut to the same length. Lowe's will even help you do that. You don't have to do a specific length. You just have to make sure that all the pieces that you cut are the same along the outside and on the inside. Problem I ran into is I wanted to get untreated rough-sided cedar, and what I didn't realize is that the size is different. So this rough cedar was a little bit thicker than the holes. This was meant for not a rough cut but a smooth cut 2x6. And so when I installed it, or tried to go to install it, the end pieces of this didn't fit in here. And so just before you leave the store, take one of these blocks and make sure that this piece fits in here, because this took me like hours with my husband's sander to get those darn pieces to fit, because I was too stubborn to go back to the store. Or maybe I'd pre-cut it, I can't remember, when I realized it. And so it was a pain, and I definitely would not do that again. I would make sure before I left the store that the wood that I bought very easily and tightly fit into these holes, and then this construction would have been very short. I basically filled this just with some dirt, borrowed a pickup truck and loaded all the dirt into it. It was difficult, but you know, that's what gardening is. There's going to be a little physical labor involved, and I would highly recommend this as a starting bed. It's in pretty solid condition. I want to say it's 2 years old. The boards were cedar, and they lasted really well, so that's a good one. This is one of those ones I picked up off the side of the street. It's a solid construction. It has less of those external like top boards, and I would kind of recommend that. I think less is more a little bit. I underfilled this one with dirt. I'd probably fill it up to the top if I were to do it over again. But this one's small enough. It's probably 2x4, and this is a great size to start with. I would just not put these tops on. And it's, you know, not very many screws. Looks like they put a bracing board on the inside to connect the two pieces. And, you know, it's 4 pieces of wood and a couple of smaller blocks and a few screws. And that would be fairly easy to construct. And I think especially the smaller sizes, there's not as much dirt in them to put pressure on the outside edges. And so you'll just notice that this one's probably going to hold up better over time than the bigger ones or the deeper ones with more dirt. But I think those are solid beds. Definitely a good place to start. If you've got, you know, a drill, a saw, some basic tools, this one's fairly easy. Or you can also have Lowe's will cut the wood for you. And this one's just even one step easier. You don't even need the drill, and you don't have to construct it together, and those concrete blocks are pretty stable. I would say the only thing is they do take up a little bit more space because they're sticking out at the edges. So if you're limited on space, and I don't know, it's kind of up to you which one looks prettier, the all wood or the wood with the concrete blocks sticking out. I think they're both fine from a visual perspective. All right, you would probably tell me this is not a garden bed, but this is roughly, I think, space-wise, equivalent to having a 4x8 garden bed. So if you have a space that is not very, you don't have a lot of land space, this is a great option. I mean, these things are fabulous. They are, I mean, you can grow flowers in them. You can grow all kinds of different fruits and veggies. It's great for herbs. I've grown a bunch of strawberries in mine this year. We'll see if I get any before the squirrels do, but the strawberries are really fun in this. The flowers are great. I've grown some kale. I've got some chamomile down there. These nostrums are doing so well this year. I've kind of let them take over, but it's just a really visually pretty garden, and it can really enhance your space if you don't have a lot of like I couldn't fit 2 more 8-foot beds here, but I can fit these 2. And the other thing is you can move these in the winter, in and out during freezes. That's how I have such beautiful nostrums this year, is because we moved this in. Well, my husband moved this in and out during the winter, and it's just a great solution for if you don't have a lot of space, or oh, and let me just show you how it works. You basically just water in the top, and there's little holes in the bottom of that, and then it will evenly water all the way down. It's got like a channel down the center, and then it'll evenly water everything. The brand is called a Greenstock. That's the particular one I have. I don't know if there are any other brands, but they're fairly reasonably priced, especially when they go on sale. So I mean, reasonably priced for you suddenly instantly have a garden and you can do it on your back patio if you don't have any other space. I have 2 of them now. One I bought, one was a gift from someone that bought it and then decided that they didn't really have the space even on their patio for gardening. All right, these are fabulous. These are Birdies, I want to say the brand is. The competitor is Vigo. They're both, I'm sure, very good brands, but these were so easy to construct. Definitely by far the easiest ones I put together. And the problem with them, this is kind of a major problem. They're about 4 foot by 8 foot, maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. I can't remember exactly. It was like metric, and so it was slightly different. But the problem with them is so much dirt. This was literally, between the 2 of them, I put a bunch of logs in the bottom, probably filled up the bottom 1/4 to 1/3 with logs and leaves and sticks and things. And they're beautiful, really easy to construct, but they took so much dirt. I mean, it was like, it would have been a week's worth of hauling. We ended up, a neighbor's kid helped us out, but it was like, it was so much dirt hauling. If you're going to get a bed like this, I mean, either just be ready for the workout, or maybe you can hire somebody to fill it with dirt, or fill it, more so full of leaves and sticks and things like that. But I really like them. I will say, I think I probably should have put the bracer, and again, once you do it, you can't really undo it, but the bracer at the very bottom, I think I should have put further up because it's bulging a little bit on the side there, but no dirt has come out. They're really sturdy and stable. They seem to stay moist pretty well, I think just because there's so much volume of dirt in there. I will also say the organic dirt that I had hauled in here, dumped on my driveway, and then hauled to the backyard was probably not the best, and that was a very disappointing situation where, like, the first year I really had trouble with peppers and beans and things like that. I think it's okay now. The contaminant doesn't seem to be a problem this year, but I think it was contaminated or something. So just test the soil if you can. Go, get a little bit of the soil that you're going to buy, test it. This one was really far away, and so I had them haul it in, and so I couldn't really test in advance, which is unfortunate. But I got these 2. It was before, at the beginning of last gardening season. They were a little bit on back order at that point. It was 2022, which is where everybody still wanted garden beds and everything was still back ordered. So, but they're they're fabulous. I like the deeper ones. I will show you. I've got another one from the same company. It's just a little different design. This is another Birdie's bed. This one is about 15 inches tall. I highly recommend this if you don't want to even pull out a drill or a saw or go try to figure out how to do wood. Birdie's or Vigo, these are very easy to assemble. Take you a couple minutes with a screwdriver and a what's that called, a wrench, and maybe not a few minutes, maybe less than an hour, and a lot less dirt to put in if it's only 15 inches deep. I think this was like a 30-inch or so wide, and it's just a really solid, easy bed. If you're a starter and you're willing to spend a little bit more money than the wood, this is definitely a great way to go. You could probably fill it with a little bit of topsoil from your yard and a couple of bags of potting soil or vegetable garden soil from your local store, and get off to the races pretty quickly. I mean, you can't fit a ton in here. I'd say 3 or 4 pepper plants, 2 or 3 eggplants. I put 5 potato plants in here. I'm going to put a bunch of sweet potato slips. Let's see. You could probably plant 2 tomatoes in here, off to the sides a little bit, and then like some basil or something like that. But it's not a huge bed, but it's definitely a great starting spot, and I do highly recommend these metal beds because they're so easy to assemble and just great for a beginner. So that's my quick rundown of garden beds. I think it's a little bit different if you're in Texas where it's hot, there's a lot of moisture, wood rots pretty quickly, and also just thinking about, and one thing I will say actually about that tower garden back there, I love it, but it is kind of hard in Texas to keep it watered. I need to put it in an automated drip system. I used to have it on an automated drip system. They basically just fill the whole top bucket and then the water would drain through. But I will have to come out here in the heat of summer and water it every day, or it won't survive. And I'll even spray the sides and stuff just to cool them down, because even though it's a fairly light color and it's in a lot of shade, it is still a pot and a relatively small one in Texas heat, and pots really struggle in Texas heat. There's even, like, I've got this little guy right here. We just had a major rainstorm, but this little guy right here, I'll want to move this into the shade in the middle of Texas summer, because it's going to dry out kind of no matter what I do, because Texas is so darn hot. And while we do get some rain in the summer, not very much, and it can be kind of prohibitively, it can be just difficult basically to have pots or anything that doesn't have a large amount of soil that can retain kind of a cooler temperature, or retain moisture basically. So just if you do things with pots, or you do a tower garden, just realize that you don't want to put it in direct sun. That's actually going to be pretty shaded in the summer. And 2, you want to have a regular watering schedule, either by an automated system. I probably do every other day in the summer for almost all of my garden beds. Tomatoes really prefer it if you do 1 deep water a week, in theory. Not in Texas. In Texas, it's actually just too darn hot, and so you'll do maybe 1 really deep watering, and then you'll do a second watering just to keep them alive for the week I'm talking about like July and August in those really hot months. Some cases, I just kind of let things kind of die back. I'll do minimum watering, or like one day a week, 1 good day a week, and then just kind of let things die back a little bit, or pull out the things that are really struggling and start over with a fall garden. And that is something to take into account with these different beds. These beds right here are big enough. I think the color isn't going to matter on them, and I just picked the color that I liked. But if you've got a spot, and I've got a decent amount of shade in the morning here and a little bit of shade in the afternoon from the other beds and things like that. But if you were to stick one of these big black beds in the middle of your yard where there's no shelter from the sun, I might go with a different color, just because Texas heat is so intense, and of course black gets hotter quicker. Probably in the winter, maybe I'm elongating my, or warming up the soil a little more quickly, maybe not, but Texas summer is the thing you really have to worry about. So I would think a little bit about the color, but especially these big beds with a little bit of shade on them, I'm not concerned. That little bed, we'll see, but I actually think it's going to be okay, even though it's a dark color, because it's big enough, and I keep it well enough watered, but we'll find out. Well, anyway, thanks for hanging out with me. That's my long-winded approach to telling you all about the different garden beds that we've had over the years, different experiences. I would say kind of depends on your price point, depends on what aesthetic that you like. I like all of them for different reasons. The wood ones are cheaper, um, even now, and they're cheaper and they're fairly easy to construct with a few basic tools. You can get some help from the folks at Lowe's. They'll help you with cutting and things like that if you don't have a chop saw or any kind of saw. You don't want to do a hand saw, that would take you forever. Just get help at Lowe's. Maybe borrow a neighbor's saw, have them teach you how to use it. Be careful, all those things. The metal beds are really easy to put together. The trough bed came fully constructed, but you can't just use it as is. That one little hole at the end isn't going to cut it. You got to drill some holes in the bottom, so you're going to need a tool there. But the tools that you need are pretty basic, and I would say you can do it. It's not any one of these beds. They're easy enough to assemble. Follow the instructions. Go find a YouTube video on how to build a wooden bed. The instructions for the one with the concrete blocks and the wood in it, just as long as you get wood that fits. So easy. I mean, that's a really easy one, and probably on the less expensive side. Those concrete blocks weren't cheap, but I want to say it was like, I don't know, $12, $15 for four when I bought them a couple years ago. I don't know what they are now, but I don't think they're prohibitively expensive. And then the wood, again, just kind of depends on the market, but I don't think that was prohibitively expensive either. Probably on the cheaper end of the beds that I've bought over the years. So anyway, you can do it. You can figure it out. I promise these things aren't too complicated, and even if you don't do a great job on the first bed or two that you build, I mean, you can see I've got beds that probably weren't constructed as robustly as they should have been. Maybe should have put some more bracers in, things like that, not realizing the pressure that the dirt was going to cause over years of use in soil and water and plants and everything else, that weight. I don't think I fully accounted for that at the beginning. And you know what I've learned over time? Those beds are still just fine. Maybe I have to add a little bit more dirt to the corner of one, but it's not like rushing all the dirt out every week. It's maybe once a season. I add a little extra dirt. So even if things don't go perfectly, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just have to try. Just have to have a garden bed in order to start growing veggies. It doesn't have to be the perfect garden bed. It doesn't have to be the right one, but it has to be the right one for you and your price point and what you need right now. So thanks for spending time with me, and have a great rest of your day. You got this.